The doctor's office called 3 times before I finally picked up, my hands covered in clay from the sculpture I'd been working on for the museum commission. I wiped my fingers on my apron and reached for the phone, already knowing what they'd say. I'd missed my annual checkup that morning, the one I'd rescheduled twice already because of work deadlines. Hey there, beautiful souls. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. All right, let us dive into what happened to me. The receptionist's voice had been clipped, professional, disappointed. I apologized, explaining about the museum project, the tight deadline, how I'd simply lost track of the day. It happened. I was 50 years old, juggling a career, a household, aging parents 2 states away. One missed appointment didn't mean anything, but my daughter Simone saw it differently. She arrived at my house that evening without calling first, her key turning in the lock before I could even get up from my work table. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor with that particular rhythm that meant trouble. I set down my sculpting tools and turned to face her, my back already tense. "Mom, we need to talk." Her voice carried that edge I'd been hearing more often lately, the one that made me feel like a child instead of the woman who'd raised her. I wiped my hands again, the clay dust falling like snow onto my jeans. "About what?" She pulled out her phone, the screen glowing between us like an accusation. Her thumb scrolled through what looked like a calendar app. "Dr. Morrison's office called me. They said you missed your appointment. Again." The word "again" hung in the air, weighted with meaning I didn't understand yet. I moved toward the kitchen, needing water, needing space, needing to do something with my hands that wasn't defensive. She followed, her footsteps quick and determined. "I've been busy with the commission. You know how important this is for my career." Simone set her phone down on the counter with more force than necessary. Her jaw was tight, her shoulders squared, in that way she'd learned from her father before the divorce. "This is exactly what I'm worried about. You're forgetting things, important things." I filled a glass from the tap, watching the water swirl and settle. My reflection in the window above the sink looked tired but present, aware, completely here. I didn't forget. I chose to prioritize my work. There's a difference. But she wasn't listening anymore. She was already pulling up something else on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with purpose. I watched her face change, hardening into a decision I hadn't been consulted about. The water in my glass trembled slightly, and I realized my hands were shaking. "I'm calling Aunt Patricia," she said, the words dropping like stones into still water. "And Marcus, too. We need to have a family meeting." My brother Marcus lived 40 minutes away, worked 60-hour weeks at his law firm. Patricia, my older sister, had her own health problems to manage. The thought of dragging them into this, whatever this was, made my chest tighten. "A family meeting about what exactly?" Simone looked up from her phone, and something in her eyes made my stomach drop. It was pity, mixed with determination, wrapped in what she probably thought was love. "About getting you help, Mom, before it gets worse." The word "worse" hung in the kitchen like smoke after a fire. I set the glass down carefully on the granite counter, feeling the cool stone beneath my fingertips. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the hum of the refrigerator. Simone had already turned away, the phone pressed to her ear. I watched her shoulders rise and fall with an exaggerated sigh, the kind she used when she wanted sympathy. Through the speaker, I heard Patricia's muffled voice answer. "Aunt Patricia? We need to talk about Mom." Simone walked into the living room, but her voice carried back through the doorway. "No, it's serious. She's forgetting appointments. Important ones. My legs moved before I'd decided to follow. I gripped the doorframe, wood grain pressing into my palm. Simone paced in front of my bookshelf, the one I'd organized just last week by subject and author. Every spine aligned perfectly, every volume exactly where I'd placed it. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm worried it might be early-stage dementia," Simone continued, lowering her voice but not enough. "She's acting like everything's fine, but that's how it starts, right?" The floor tilted beneath me. I reached for the back of the couch, steadying myself against the burgundy fabric. 27 years I'd worked as a project manager at Bennett Construction. 27 years of juggling schedules, budgets, personnel conflicts, deadline crunches. Not once had I missed a critical meeting. Not once had I lost track of millions of dollars in equipment and materials. But one dinner with my daughter's boyfriend, and suddenly, my mind was failing. Simone glanced back at me, then turned away again. "Can you come over tomorrow?" "Marcus, too. We need to figure out next steps." I walked past her to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Outside, the maple tree I'd planted 15 years ago swayed in the evening breeze. Its branches scraped against the gutter I'd been meaning to fix. Mrs. Chen from next door walked her terrier past my driveway, the same route she took every night at 7:30. Everything in its place. Everything following its pattern. Except my own daughter was diagnosing me over the phone like I wasn't standing 10 feet away. Simone ended the call and immediately started another. I didn't turn around, but I could see her reflection in the darkening window. She chewed her bottom lip while waiting, a nervous habit from childhood. At least some things hadn't changed. "Marcus? Hey, it's me." Her voice cracked slightly. "Listen, I need you to come to Mom's tomorrow evening. It's about her health." I spun around then, fast enough that my vision blurred at the edges. "You're not doing this." She held up one finger, still talking. She missed Jared's dinner tonight, just completely forgot about it, and she's been acting strange for weeks, making excuses, getting defensive. Simone Renee Edwards. I used her full name, the one that used to stop her cold when she was testing boundaries as a teenager. "Hang up the phone." But she'd grown immune to that particular tone. She turned her back to me completely now, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "I think we need to look into memory care options. Just exploratory. I can't watch her decline without doing something." The words punched through my ribcage. Memory care. She'd skipped right past doctor's appointments and landed on facilities with locked doors and medication schedules. My knees felt watery. I sank onto the arm of the couch, gripping the cushion until my knuckles went white. Marcus's voice rose from the speaker, loud enough for me to catch fragments. "Slow down. Sure it's not overreacting?" "I'm not overreacting." Simone's volume increased. "You haven't seen her lately. She's different, forgetful, confused." I stood again, unable to stay still. My feet carried me to the kitchen, to the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Every square filled with my neat handwriting. Oil change Tuesday, board meeting Friday, Patricia's birthday next week. The Riverside Commission presentation circled in red marker. I yanked it off the wall, the thumbtack scattering across the floor with a tiny ping. Simone appeared in the doorway as I spread the calendar on the counter. "I'll text you the time," she said into the phone, then ended the call. "Look at this." I jabbed my finger at the filled squares. "Does this look like someone who's losing her mind?" She barely glanced at it. "Mom, people with dementia can seem totally normal for a while. That's why early intervention is so important." "I don't have dementia." The words exploded out of me, too loud, too sharp. I made a choice, a conscious, deliberate choice about how to spend my evening. Simone's expression shifted into something worse than pity. Patience, the kind nurses used with difficult patients. She moved closer, reaching for my hand. I know this is scary to hear. I jerked away, putting the counter between us. My hip bumped the edge, sending a jolt of pain up my side. The calendar slipped to the floor, months of careful planning scattered across the tile. My hands trembled as I bent to retrieve the calendar pages. December had landed under the sink, January near the baseboards. The glossy paper slipped between my fingers twice before I managed to gather them. Each page represented hours of coordination, color-coded appointments spanning months. Evidence of a functioning mind that Simone refused to acknowledge. She made no move to help me collect the scattered sheets. Instead, she leaned against the doorframe, her phone clutched in both hands like a shield. Her thumbs moved across the screen in rapid bursts. Texting someone, making plans, building her case against my competence. I straightened too quickly. The room tilted for half a heartbeat before steadying. Simone's eyes tracked the momentary wobble, and I watched her thumbs move faster across the glass surface. Another detail she'd twist into proof of decline. I gripped the counter edge, pressing my palms flat against the cool granite until my balance fully returned. "Who are you texting?" The question came out harder than intended. "Just coordinating." She didn't look up from the screen. The vagueness stung worse than a direct answer would have. I moved past her back toward the living room, clutching the crumpled calendar pages against my chest. My briefcase sat beside the couch where I'd dropped it after work. I yanked it open, pulling out the Riverside Commission proposal. 43 pages of architectural renderings, cost projections, and environmental impact studies. Work I'd completed 3 weeks ahead of schedule. I spread the documents across the coffee table, arranging them in precise order. The afternoon light streaming through the window illuminated every detail of the waterfront development plans. Months of research and design crystallized into something tangible. Something that proved my mind operated at full capacity. Simone entered the room behind me. Her footsteps stopped just inside the doorway. I didn't turn around, didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing the desperation probably written across my face. Instead, I organized the pages, squaring each corner, aligning each edge. "This is what I was working on instead of your dinner." My finger traced the building elevation on page 7. "The presentation is Monday. 3 city council members, 2 developers, and the head of the planning commission. I've been preparing for 6 months." She moved closer, but didn't sit. Through my peripheral vision, I saw her arms cross over her chest. The phone remained visible, gripped in her right hand, ready for more evidence collection, more consultation with whoever she'd recruited to her cause. I flipped to the budget analysis, then the traffic flow projections, then the community benefit breakdown. Each page represented countless hours of meticulous calculation and creative problem-solving. Each number cross-checked and verified. Each rendering refined through multiple iterations until it achieved exactly the right balance of form and function. "Mom, I'm sure your work is fine, but..." "Fine?" The word exploded from somewhere deep in my chest. I swept my hand across the documents. "This is better than fine. This is the culmination of my entire career." "The Planning Commission specifically requested me for this project." Simone's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in her cheek, the same tic she'd inherited from her father. She glanced down at her phone screen as it lit up with an incoming message. Her expression shifted as she read it, something between relief and vindication crossing her features. The doorbell rang before I could demand to know what the message said. 3 sharp chimes that echoed through the house. Simone moved immediately toward the foyer, her stride quick and purposeful. Too quick, too expected. She'd been waiting for this interruption. I followed her down the hallway, my sock feet silent against the hardwood. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could make out 2 figures on the porch. Simone's hand reached for the deadbolt without hesitation, without calling out to ask who'd arrived unannounced at my house. The door swung open. My son-in-law Gary stood on the threshold, his face carefully neutral. Beside him, a woman I didn't recognize held a leather portfolio case against her hip. She wore professional attire, navy slacks and a pressed white blouse, with a lanyard hanging around her neck that displayed some kind of official identification card. "That was fast," Simone said, stepping aside to let them enter. Gary offered me an apologetic grimace as he crossed into the foyer. The stranger followed with measured steps, her gaze sweeping across the entryway before landing on me. Her expression remained professionally blank, but her eyes performed an assessment, cataloging details, making judgments. "Mrs. Edwards?" The woman extended her hand. "I'm Julia Chen from Senior Services." I kept both arms rigid at my sides, refusing the handshake. The title, Mrs. Edwards, felt like an accusation dressed in courtesy. Behind her, Simone closed the front door with a decisive click that sounded like a trap snapping shut. The air in my foyer shifted, growing denser with the weight of this staged intervention. Julia Chen lowered her rejected hand slowly, her fingers curling into her palm as she made another notation in her mental ledger. The portfolio case shifted against her hip, leather creaking softly. I moved backward 3 steps, positioning myself near the archway to the living room. Exit strategy. My shoulder blades pressed against the door frame, using the solid wood as an anchor point. Gary wouldn't meet my eyes, his attention fixed somewhere over my left shoulder, jaw muscles working beneath his skin. "I appreciate you being available on such short notice," Simone said, her voice carrying that same artificially warm tone she'd used earlier. She gestured toward the living room with an open palm, playing hostess in my home. Julia Chen's shoes clicked against the hardwood as she moved past me. Professional flats, rubber-soled, designed for long days of walking through strangers' houses. The scent of her perfume trailed behind her, something floral and antiseptic, the kind of fragrance chosen to be inoffensive, forgettable. She settled onto my leather armchair without invitation, setting her portfolio on the coffee table where I'd abandoned my forgotten tea earlier. Simone claimed the sofa, patting the cushion beside her. An invitation, a summons. Gary hesitated in the archway before accepting, his 6-foot frame folding awkwardly as he sat. His knee bounced once, twice, then stilled when Simone's hand landed on his thigh. I remained standing, my back still against the archway. The hardwood floor felt cold through my socks, tiny pinpricks of chill traveling up through my ankles. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable sitting down, Mrs. Edwards?" Julia Chen extracted a tablet from her portfolio, its screen illuminating her face with cold blue light. "This shouldn't take long." "I'm fine where I am." My voice came out harder than intended, each word sharp-edged. Julia's thumbs moved across the tablet screen, typing something. Everything becoming data, everything becoming evidence. Her fingernails were cut short, practical, with no polish. Wedding ring on the left hand, simple gold band, slightly worn. She'd been doing this work long enough for the shine to fade. "I understand this feels intrusive," she said, not looking up from her screen. Family members often feel defensive when concerns are raised. "That's perfectly normal." The words landed like calculated blows. Family members, concerns, normal. Each term weaponized through professional distance. I pressed harder against the doorframe, splinters from the old wood catching against my shirt fabric. Gary finally raised his eyes to mine. "Lauren, we're worried. Yesterday you were supposed to meet me at the bank to co-sign for Simone's student loan refinancing. Remember? We waited 40 minutes. The accusation hung in the air between us. I searched my memory, rifling through yesterday's events like shuffling a deck of scattered cards. Morning coffee, grocery shopping, afternoons spent reorganizing the linen closet because the towels had been folded incorrectly. No memory of any appointment. "You never told me about—" I sent 3 text messages. Gary pulled out his phone, thumb swiping across the screen. "Called twice. Simone even stopped by that morning to remind you in person." I watched him scroll through his message history, watched the blue and gray bubbles fill his screen. Proof. Evidence. But memory remained stubbornly blank, like pressing against a wall where a door should be. Julia Chen's fingers continued their typing, recording this exchange. Her head tilted slightly to the right, observing. Simone leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands clasped together. The picture of concerned family. Worried daughter. The performance refined through practice. "There have been other incidents," Simone said softly. "Last month, she accused me of stealing her jewelry box. We found it 3 days later in the garage freezer." My hands clenched at my sides, nails digging crescents into my palms. The jewelry box. I'd been looking for it for weeks before it reappeared mysteriously on my dresser. No explanation. No discussion. I never put anything in the freezer. "Mom, you were standing right there when we opened it." Simone's eyes glistened, moisture gathering along her lower lids, tears on command. "You seemed so confused. We were all really scared." Julia Chen set down her tablet, giving us her full attention now. Her expression shifted into professional sympathy, the kind manufactured through training seminars and workplace development courses. She reached into her portfolio and extracted a stapled packet of papers, placing them on the coffee table facing me. "Mrs. Edwards, I'd like to conduct a brief cognitive assessment. Just some simple questions to establish a baseline." The packet showed standardized forms, questions printed in clean black font. "What year is it? Who is the current president?" Count backward from 100 by sevens. Tests designed to measure decline, to quantify deterioration, to transform a person into a diagnosis. I pushed away from the archway, moving toward the coffee table. My knee collided with its edge, a sharp crack of bone against wood that sent pain radiating up my thigh. The forgotten teacup rattled in its saucer. Julia Chen's hand shot out, steadying the cup before it could spill. "Careful," she murmured. I grabbed the assessment packet, papers crinkling under my grip. The questions swam before my eyes, words blurring together. Behind me, I heard Simone's quiet intake of breath, heard Gary's weight shift on the sofa cushions, heard the soft tap of Julia's fingernail against her tablet screen. "I'm not taking this." I dropped the papers back onto the table. "I want all of you out of my house." Julia Chen's expression didn't change. She'd heard this before, seen this resistance play out in countless living rooms across the city. Her hands folded in her lap, patient. "I understand you're upset, but your daughter has legal grounds to pursue a competency evaluation. We can do this informally here or—" "Or what?" My voice rose, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You'll have me committed? Declared incompetent?" Simone stood, crossing the distance between us. Her hand reached for my arm, fingers gentle. Too gentle. the touch of someone handling fragile things. "Nobody's talking about that, Mom. We just want to make sure you're safe." I jerked away from her grasp, stumbling backward. My hip struck the corner of the bookshelf, sending a framed photograph crashing to the floor. Glass shattered, scattering across the hardwood in glittering fragments. The photo, my late husband and me at Simone's college graduation, lay face up among the shards, our smiling faces now separated by cracks. Segment 5. Gary rushed forward, his shoes crunching over broken glass. I held up my hand, stopping him mid-stride. Blood pounded in my ears, drowning out Simone's protests. The photograph stared up at me, Marcus's face fractured into a dozen pieces. 23 years he'd been gone. 23 years I'd managed alone, raised Simone, built my career, maintained this house without a single helping hand. Now they wanted to strip it all away. I bent down, ignoring the sharp bite in my lower back. My fingers closed around the frame's edge, careful to avoid the jagged glass. Gary crouched beside me, reaching for the larger shards. His wedding ring clinked against the fragments as he gathered them into his palm. "Let me get a dustpan," Simone said, already moving toward the kitchen. "Don't bother." I straightened, clutching the damaged frame against my chest. "You won't be here long enough." Dr. Harrison stood, smoothing her blazer with practiced efficiency. She moved around the coffee table, positioning herself between me and the hallway. Not blocking exactly, but creating a barrier nonetheless. Her eyes tracked my movements with clinical precision, cataloging every gesture, every facial expression, building her case. "Lauren, I need you to understand the situation." Her voice carried the weight of authority, years of medical training compressed into that measured tone. "Your daughter showed me documentation. 3 missed mortgage payments, unpaid utility bills, a check you wrote last month for $800 to a number that doesn't exist." My stomach clenched. The check. That damn check to the contractor who'd promised to fix the back deck. I'd found his flyer in my mailbox, called the number, arranged everything. He'd seemed legitimate, professional. That was a scam. Anyone could have fallen for it. Combined with the other incidents? What other incidents? I set the broken frame on the bookshelf, glass tinkling as it settled. "I'm 2 months behind on bills because my insurance company screwed up my pension deposit. I've been on hold with them for weeks. That's not dementia. That's bureaucratic incompetence." Simone returned empty-handed, her face pale. She stood near the kitchen doorway, arms wrapped around her torso. Gary moved beside her, his hand finding the small of her back. United front, my daughter and her husband lined up against me with their expert witness providing ammunition. "What about Dad's death certificate?" Simone's voice cracked. "You called the county office last week asking when they'd issue it. He died in 2001, Mom. 23 years ago." The room tilted. I gripped the bookshelf edge, fingers digging into polished wood. That phone call. I'd been cleaning out the attic, found old insurance paperwork, realized I couldn't locate the original death certificate. Just making sure the county had records, that's all. Perfectly reasonable. I was organizing files. Needed a certified copy for estate purposes. "You told the clerk you were waiting for the coroner's report?" Simone stepped forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You said the hospital wouldn't tell you anything. You thought he'd just died. Recently." My legs trembled. I sank onto the armchair, leather creaking under my weight. The room spun, walls pressing inward. No, that wasn't right. I remembered that conversation differently, didn't I? Dr. Harrison knelt before me, eye level now instead of towering above. Her proximity felt invasive, suffocating. I could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "These episodes can be frightening," she said softly. "But early intervention makes all the difference. Let me do a proper evaluation. We'll take it one step at a time." I looked past her to Simone, searching my daughter's face for some sign of doubt, some crack in her conviction. Found none. She believed this. Genuinely believed her mother had deteriorated into someone who couldn't remember her own husband's death, couldn't manage basic finances, couldn't function independently. The file folder sat on the coffee table where Simone had left it, thick manila stuffed with papers. Evidence. I lunged for it, sending Dr. Harrison stumbling backward. My fingers closed around the folder's edge, yanking it toward me. Papers spilled out. Bank statements, medical records, printed emails. I scanned them frantically, searching for whatever ammunition Simone had collected. There. A letter from Brookside Memory Care Facility. Consultation scheduled for next Wednesday. Below that, a real estate agent's business card clipped to a market analysis for my house. Estimated value, $847,000. My hands shook so violently the papers rattled. They'd already contacted a realtor, already toured memory care facilities, made plans for my life without consulting me, without my knowledge, without my consent. "You're selling my house." The words came out flat, emotionless. Shock had numbed everything else. Simone grabbed the papers from my hands, shoving them back into the folder. Her movements were jerky, panicked. "We were just exploring options. In case you could convince everyone I'm incompetent." I stood, fury overriding the trembling in my limbs. "How much, Simone? How much do you stand to gain?" Her face went white. Gary moved protectively in front of her, his jaw clenched. "That's completely unfair," he said. "We're trying to help you." I pushed past him, striding toward the front door. My hand closed around the deadbolt, yanking it open. Cool evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and freshly cut grass. The neighborhood stretched before me, familiar houses with their perfectly manicured lawns, their two-car garages, their families intact and functioning. "Get out!" I held the door wide, muscles straining. "All of you!" Gary didn't move. His hands curled into fists at his sides, knuckles whitening against his olive skin. The muscles in his jaw worked back and forth, grinding teeth that I'd paid to straighten with 3 years of orthodontia when he was 12. "We're not leaving until you calm down." His voice carried that patronizing tone I'd heard doctors use in hospital corridors with confused patients. I grabbed the doorframe, steadying myself against the rage that flooded my chest cavity. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. The brass doorknob cut into my palm as I squeezed it. "I'm calm." Each word emerged, clipped, measured. "I'm also done being treated like a child in my own home." Simone stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against my hardwood floors. She'd changed those shoes 3 times before the dinner. I'd noticed. I always noticed. That's what mothers did. Cataloged details, remembered patterns, paid attention. Nothing about me was deteriorating. She reached for my arm. I jerked away, backing onto the porch. The wooden boards creaked under my weight. Someone had left the wicker chair cushion out, and it was damp from afternoon rain. That detail registered sharp and clear, not fuzzy or confused. "Mom, please." Simone's eyes glistened, but I couldn't tell if the tears were real or manufactured. "You're not thinking straight." "I'm thinking perfectly straight." I pointed at the folder still clutched in Gary's hand. "Straight enough to understand you've been planning this for months. The missed appointment was just an excuse." Marcus materialized behind them in the foyer, his phone out, recording. The red light blinked at me like an accusation. My stomach dropped. "What are you doing?" "Documenting." He didn't lower the phone. "For the evaluation. They'll need to see how you respond to stress." The violation of it, the calculated cruelty, stole my breath. I lunged forward, reaching for the phone. Marcus stepped back, raising it higher. My shoulder connected with the doorframe. Pain exploded through my collarbone, sharp and immediate. I gasped, clutching the joint. "See?" Simone's voice pitched higher. "She's getting violent." "I'm not." The words caught in my throat. My shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, a deep ache that radiated down my arm. I'd hit it harder than I thought. "You can't do this." Gary moved then, closing the distance between us in 3 long strides. His hand locked around my upper arm, fingers digging into soft flesh. He'd played linebacker in high school. His grip hadn't weakened. "We're calling Dr. Harrison." He pulled me back inside, forcing me past the threshold. "You need to be evaluated properly." I twisted, trying to break free. My feet slid on the hardwood. My other shoulder slammed into the wall, knocking the framed photo of my mother crooked. Glass rattled in the frame. Gary's grip only tightened, bruising pressure that made my fingers tingle. "Let go of me!" I drove my elbow backward, connecting with his ribs. Not hard enough to hurt him, just enough to make him loosen his hold. He released me with a shove. I stumbled, catching myself against the console table. My hip collided with the corner. Keys scattered across the surface, jingling like wind chimes. The impact sent pain radiating through my pelvis, adding to the growing collection of aches. "You see what I mean?" Gary addressed Simone like I wasn't there. "She's completely irrational." My chest heaved. Sweat dampened my collar. Every part of me screamed to fight, to physically remove them from my space. But that's what they wanted. Evidence of instability, of dangerous behavior. Proof to show whatever psychiatrist they'd already scheduled me with. I straightened slowly, deliberately, smoothed my blouse, rolled my shoulders back despite the pain. When I spoke, my voice came out steady. "I want my lawyer present for any evaluation." Simone's expression flickered. Surprise, then something calculating. She exchanged glances with Marcus, who finally lowered his phone. "That's not necessary," she said. "Dr. Harrison is just going to talk with you." "Then you won't mind if my attorney joins the conversation." I walked past them into the living room, retrieving my purse from the sofa. My hands shook as I dug for my phone, but I kept my movements controlled, measured, sane. The phone felt heavy in my palm. I pulled up my contacts, scrolling to Patricia Owen's friend from law school, who'd built a career in elder law. My thumb hovered over her name. "Mom, wait." Gary's tone shifted, softening. "We don't need lawyers. This is family." "Family doesn't ambush each other." I pressed dial. "Family doesn't plan to institutionalize each other behind closed doors." Lauren's story. Block 7. The phone rang twice before Patricia's voicemail kicked in. My stomach dropped. Of course, she'd be in court at this hour. I lowered the phone, my jaw clenched so tight my molars ached. Simone moved closer, her heels clicking against my hardwood floor with calculated precision. She held out a manila folder I hadn't noticed before, its edges crisp and new. "Lauren, we've documented everything. The missed payments, the confused phone calls, the incident at the grocery store." My hand shot out, snatching the folder before she could pull it back. The paper felt too smooth, too official. I flipped it open. Printouts of bank statements stared back at me. My statements. from my private accounts. Red circles marked around transactions. Notes scrawled in Simone's handwriting. Heat flooded my face. My vision blurred at the edges. Someone had accessed my financial records. Someone had been watching, cataloging, building a case while I'd been trying to rebuild my career. I flipped through more pages. Photos, blurry shots of me at Target, apparently looking confused by the self-checkout machine. Another of me standing in my driveway at 7 a.m. in my bathrobe. The angle suggested they'd been taken from a car parked on the street. My fingers went numb. The folder slipped, papers scattering across the coffee table. A photograph slid to the floor. Me at my front door, struggling with my keys. The date stamp showed last Tuesday, the night I'd returned from my presentation in Chicago, exhausted and fumbling in the dark. "You've been surveilling me." The words came out strangled, my throat constricted. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Marcus stepped forward, his phone now in his pocket, his expression carefully neutral. Professional. "It's evidence, not surveillance. We needed documentation for the competency hearing." The room tilted. I pressed my palm against my forehead, trying to process. Competency hearing. They'd already filed paperwork, already started legal proceedings. The forgotten appointment wasn't the beginning. It was the excuse they'd been waiting for. My legs gave out. I sank onto the sofa, my body suddenly too heavy to support. The cushion compressed beneath me. I stared at the scattered papers, each one a violation, a theft of my privacy and autonomy. Gary crouched beside me, his hand reaching for my shoulder. I jerked away before he could make contact. "Don't touch me." He withdrew, hurt flashing across his face. But beneath it, I saw relief. He wanted me to push him away. Every rejection became another data point in their narrative. I forced myself to breathe, in through my nose, out through my mouth. The technique I'd learned in my 20s, when panic attacks had nearly derailed my doctoral defense. My ribs expanded. My diaphragm lowered. Oxygen reached my brain. Think. There had to be a way out. I grabbed my phone again, pulling up my browser. My fingers trembled as I typed, "Emergency guardianship attorney near me." The screen blurred. I blinked hard, forcing my eyes to focus. Names and numbers appeared. I tapped the first one. Simone's hand covered my screen. Her palm blocked the light, casting shadows across my lap. "Making frantic calls will only support our position. Dr. Harrison arrives in 30 minutes. I suggest you use that time to compose yourself." I looked up at her. Really looked. Her makeup was flawless, her suit impeccable. A gold bracelet glinted at her wrist. Expensive, custom. The kind of thing Simone couldn't afford on a social worker's salary, unless someone was funding her, unless Gary had been paying her for months to build this case. My stomach turned. Bile rose in my throat. I swallowed it down, tasting acid. "How much is he paying you?" Her eyes widened fractionally. A tell. Then her professional mask slammed back into place. "This isn't about money. It's about ensuring you receive proper care." I stood abruptly. My knees protested but held. I walked past her, past Marcus, past Gary, into my kitchen. The tiles felt cool through my socks. I gripped the counter edge, my knuckles whitening. They followed me. Of course they followed me. They couldn't let me out of sight now, couldn't risk me making calls or documenting this ambush. I opened the refrigerator, pulled out a water bottle. My hands shook so badly the cap fell, bouncing across the floor. I left it, drank directly from the bottle, the cold liquid shocking my system back into focus. Marcus positioned himself in the doorway, blocking the exit. His posture suggested casual observation, but his eyes tracked my every movement. "We're not trying to hurt you," he said. I set the bottle down hard. Water sloshed over the rim, spreading across the granite. "You're trying to steal my life." The words hung in the air, true and undeniable. They wanted my house, my accounts, my autonomy. They wanted to pack me into some facility where I couldn't question or resist, where Gary could liquidate my assets without interference. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Patricia's name glowed on the screen. Relief flooded through me so intensely my legs went weak. I answered before the second ring. "Patricia!" Gary lunged forward, reaching for the phone. I spun away, putting the kitchen island between us. He circled left. I moved right. A grotesque dance in my own kitchen. "Lauren? What's wrong?" Patricia's voice carried concern even through the tiny speaker. "I need you at my house. Now." "Gary's trying to have me declared incompetent." Simone moved toward me from the other side. They were hurting me, cornering me against the pantry door. My pulse hammered in my ears. The phone pressed against my cheek, slick with sweat. "Don't hang up that phone," Patricia said sharply. "Put me on speaker." I jabbed the speaker button. Patricia's voice filled the kitchen, sharp and commanding. "Gary Edwards, you touch your mother, and I'm calling 911 right now." Gary froze mid-step. His hand still extended toward me, fingers splayed. Simone stopped moving. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the doorway, his casual facade cracking. The three of them stood like statues, calculating their next move against this new variable. The doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent. 3 quick chimes that shattered the standoff. Gary's face drained of color. He glanced toward the front door, then back at me. His jaw worked, grinding teeth I couldn't see. Simone grabbed his arm, whispering something urgent. Marcus stepped fully into the kitchen now, abandoning his post. "Don't answer that," Gary said. I was already moving. My hip crashed against the kitchen island as I pushed past. Pain flared hot and immediate, but I didn't slow down. The phone stayed locked in my grip, Patricia's presence my only shield. My bare feet slapped against hardwood as I ran through the dining room. Behind me, chairs scraped. Heavy footsteps pounded. Gary was coming. I could hear his breathing, ragged and angry. He was faster than me, younger. I was 50 with a body that ached in the mornings and couldn't run without gasping. The doorbell rang again. Longer this time. Whoever stood outside was leaning into it, holding the button down. The sound drilled through my skull, beautiful and desperate. My fingers closed around the deadbolt. Cold metal bit into my palm as I twisted. Gary's shadow fell across me. His hand slammed against the door above my head, holding it shut. The impact rattled the frame. His other hand grabbed my shoulder, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. I drove my elbow backward, caught him in the ribs. He grunted, his grip loosening for half a second. I yanked the door open with both hands, throwing my whole weight into it. Patricia stood on my porch. She wasn't alone. Detective Raymond Chen from the city police department stood beside her, his badge clipped to his belt. Behind them, a patrol car sat at the curb, lights off, but unmistakably official. Gary released me so fast I stumbled forward. Patricia caught me, her hands steady and warm. I pressed my face against her shoulder, breath coming in short gasps that burned my lungs. She smelled like lavender and coffee. Safe. Real. "Mrs. Edwards?" Detective Chen's voice was calm, professional. The kind of voice that had talked people down from ledges. "Your attorney called us, said there might be a situation here requiring intervention." I turned around. Gary stood in my foyer, looking smaller somehow. The aggression had drained from his posture, replaced by something desperate and cornered. Simone emerged from the dining room, her expression carefully neutral. Professional mask back in place. Marcus lingered near the kitchen entrance, no longer blocking anything. "There's no situation," Gary said. His voice shook slightly. "This is a family matter. My mother's been having episodes, confusion. We're concerned about her welfare." Detective Chen pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket. He flipped it open with practiced efficiency, pen already in hand. His eyes moved from Gary to me, assessing. "Episodes," he repeated, writing. "What kind of episodes?" "She forgot an important appointment, got lost driving home from the grocery store last month. Today she accused me of—" Gary's voice cracked. He pressed his palm against his forehead, rubbing hard. "She's not herself." Patricia's arm tightened around my shoulders. She guided me toward the porch swing, helping me sit. My legs folded beneath me, muscles trembling from the adrenaline crash. She remained standing beside me, a barrier between my son and me. "Lauren's been my client for 15 years, Patricia said. Her voice carried no anger, just cold facts. "She's sharp as ever. We had lunch last Tuesday. Discussed complex estate planning for 2 hours. She caught an error in my paperwork that would have cost her thousands." Detective Chen wrote more notes. His pen scratched across paper, filling lines with evidence. Gary opened his mouth, then closed it. Simone touched his elbow, a warning gesture. "Don't speak. Don't incriminate yourself further." "I'd like to hear from Mrs. Edwards," Detective Chen said. He moved closer, crouching slightly so we were eye level. His face showed nothing but patient attention. No judgment. No assumptions. Just a man doing his job, collecting facts. My throat felt raw. The words came out hoarse, scratched up from somewhere deep. "My son wants to have me declared incompetent. He brought a psychiatrist here without my knowledge or consent. They've been cornering me in my own home, trying to intimidate me into signing documents." Gary made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. He spread his hands wide, appealing to Detective Chen with desperate sincerity. "That's the paranoia I'm talking about. We're trying to help her." "By trapping her in her kitchen?" Patricia pulled her phone out, swiped through screens with quick, efficient movements. "Lauren called me 20 minutes ago. I heard everything. Your voice. Marcus identifying himself. The psychiatrist discussing evaluation. And Lauren repeatedly telling you all to leave." She turned her phone toward Detective Chen. The recording app showed a 23-minute timeline, still running. Detective Chen stood. His knees popped slightly. He tucked the notebook away and hooked his thumbs in his belt, a casual stance that somehow carried absolute authority. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. His voice remained level, but something in his posture straightened the spines of everyone in the room. Gary's hands dropped to his sides. Marcus shifted weight from foot to foot near the doorway, suddenly looking less like an authority figure and more like a man calculating exit routes. "Mr. Edwards, you and your guests are going to leave this residence immediately. Mrs. Edwards has made it clear she does not consent to your presence." Detective Chen pulled a business card from his shirt pocket, handed it to me. The cardstock felt crisp between my fingers, substantial. "Real." I gripped it tight enough to bend the edges. "If they refuse to leave or attempt to contact you against your wishes, you call that number directly. Reference case number 2847B. We'll have officers here within minutes." Gary's face had gone through several colors. Now it settled on a mottled purple, rage and humiliation mixing into something ugly. His jaw worked like he was chewing stones. "This is insane. She's my mother. I have a right." You have no rights inside someone else's home without their permission. Detective Chen stepped toward the door, gesturing for Marcus and Simone to move. That's not a family matter. That's trespassing. We clear? Marcus grabbed his leather bag from where he'd set it on the counter. His movements were quick, practiced, the efficiency of someone who'd made hasty exits before. Simone followed, her heels clicking rapid beats across my kitchen tile. She kept her head down, refused to meet anyone's eyes. Gary stood frozen for 3 heartbeats. 4. His chest heaved with shallow breaths. Then he turned to me, and for just a second I saw something raw in his expression. Not anger. Something closer to genuine bewilderment, like he truly couldn't understand how his plan had collapsed. "Mom, please, I'm trying to save you." The words might have worked a week ago, maybe even yesterday, but I'd spent too many hours replaying conversations, examining motivations, seeing the pattern. He wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to save himself from the inconvenience of a mother who wouldn't fade quietly into whatever comfortable corner he'd designated for her. I said nothing. Just stood there with Patricia's hand steady on my shoulder and Detective Chen's card creasing in my grip. Gary's face hardened. He grabbed his keys from the counter with enough force to scrape the granite. Stormed toward the door where Marcus and Simone waited in the hallway. At the threshold, he paused, turned back. "You'll regret this. When you're wandering the streets confused, when you hurt yourself because nobody's there to help, you'll wish you'd listened." Detective Chen cleared his throat, a soft sound that carried more weight than Gary's threats. Gary left. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. Silence settled over the kitchen like dust after an explosion. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven. Patricia's hand squeezed my shoulder once, then released. Detective Chen walked to the window, watched through the curtains as 3 figures moved down the driveway toward separate cars. "You should consider changing your locks," he said without turning around. "And document everything, every call, every attempt at contact. Keep that recording, Ms. Patricia Owens." She saved her audio file with quick taps, then pulled up her email. "I'm sending this to myself and to Lauren right now. Multiple backups." My phone chimed twice in my pocket. The sound felt absurdly normal, like the world was just continuing on, oblivious to the fact that my son had tried to steal my life. Outside, engines started. Tires crunched on gravel. Detective Chen waited until the sounds faded completely before stepping away from the window. He looked at me with the kind of professional assessment that reminded me of my teaching days. That moment when you gauge whether a student is truly understanding or just nodding along. "You okay, Mrs. Edwards?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. My hands shook. My throat felt stripped raw. Adrenaline was draining out of my system, leaving behind something hollow and aching. But I was standing in my own kitchen, surrounded by people who'd chosen to believe me, to help me. Not people trying to package me up and file me away. I nodded, managed a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "I will be." Block 1010. 6 months later, I stood in my backyard watching morning light filter through maple branches. Dew soaked through my canvas sneakers as I carried the watering can to the raised garden beds I'd built in April. Tomato plants, heavy with fruit, sagged against their stakes. I pressed my thumb against a ripe beefsteak, felt the give of perfect ripeness, and twisted it free from the vine. The kitchen window was open. Inside, Patricia's laugh drifted out, mingling with the clatter of dishes. She'd started coming for breakfast every Sunday after her shift at the hospital ended. We'd sit for hours, talking about everything and nothing. the comfortable silence between words as nourishing as the food. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from the community center lit up the screen. Reminder that my literacy tutoring session started at 10. 3 students now, all adults working toward their GEDs. Their determination reminded me why I'd loved teaching in the first place, before the weight of 30 years had dulled that edge. I carried the tomato inside, rinsed it under cold water. Patricia stood at the stove, scrambling eggs with practiced efficiency. Her scrubs had been replaced by jeans and a faded college sweatshirt. She glanced over, eyebrows raised at the massive tomato. "Show off," she said, grinning. "Wait until the peppers come in." The eggs sizzled. Toast popped. We moved around each other in the small kitchen, with the ease of ritual, plates and forks and coffee mugs finding their places. Through the window above the sink, I could see Mrs. Henderson from next door walking her terrier. She waved. I waved back. My lawyer had called yesterday with the final paperwork. Gary had signed everything, transferring back the assets he'd moved, relinquishing any claims to power of attorney, formally withdrawing the conservatorship petition. The document sat in a folder on my desk, clinical and cold, reducing 6 months of upheaval to numbered paragraphs and legal terminology. He hadn't called, hadn't written. The silence was its own kind of communication. Some nights I still woke up gasping, dreams thick with courtrooms and locked doors. But those nights were growing fewer. The space they left behind filled slowly with other things. The satisfaction of dirt under my fingernails, the rhythm of tutoring sessions, the accumulating proof that my mind was sharp, reliable, entirely my own. Patricia carried plates to the table. Sunlight cut across the kitchen in golden bars, illuminating dust motes that drifted like tiny planets. I sat down, felt the solid wood of the chair beneath me, the weight of the fork in my hand. Everything was exactly where it should be. Detective Chen stopped by the hospital yesterday, Patricia said, spearing a forkful of eggs. "Wanted to let you know they closed the investigation. Everything's documented." I nodded. Took a bite of tomato, still warm from the sun. The taste exploded across my tongue, sweet, acidic, alive. After breakfast, I drove to the community center. The old brick building sat on the east side of town, its parking lot cracked and weedy but welcoming in a way the courthouse had never been. Inside, the smell of old books and floor wax wrapped around me like an embrace. My students waited in the small classroom, 2 women and 1 man, all of them older than my Gary, all of them choosing to be here. We worked through reading comprehension, through the stumbling blocks of grammar and punctuation. I watched them sound out words, saw the frustration and triumph play across their faces, and remembered what it felt like to help someone discover their own capability. At noon, I stopped at the farmer's market. Vendors called out their wares under white tent canopies. I bought fresh bread, local honey, a bouquet of sunflowers that blazed like captured sunshine. The woman at the flower stand recognized me, smiled, made small talk about the weather. Normal interactions, unremarkable and therefore precious. Home again, I arranged the sunflowers in a blue ceramic vase. They dominated the kitchen table, too large and too bright, refusing to be subtle. I stood back, adjusted one stem, then left them alone. The afternoon stretched out quiet and mine. I read on the porch, pulled weeds from the flower beds, called my cousin in Atlanta, the one who'd driven 6 hours to stand beside me in that courtroom, and caught up on family news that didn't feel like interrogation. Evening came soft and purple. I made dinner, pasta with the garden tomatoes, fresh basil, garlic bread that filled the house with warm, yeasty comfort. I ate at the kitchen table, alone but not lonely, the sunflowers keeping silent watch. Later, sitting in the living room with a book in my lap, I found my gaze drifting to the empty space where Gary used to sit when he visited. Before, when visits were just visits, not surveillance disguised as concern. The pain was there. Probably always would be. But it had changed shape, become something I could hold without it cutting so deep. My son had tried to convince everyone I was disappearing. Instead, I'd found myself again, sharper, stronger, done with apologizing for taking up space in my own life. The book waited in my hands. I turned the page, kept reading, as the house settled into nighttime silence around me. Tomorrow would bring more tutoring, more gardening, more small accumulations of proof that I was exactly who I'd always been. Just me, present, accounted for, whole. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.